Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this webinar today. I'm Lauren Presutti, and I am a cross-discipline practitioner of both mental health treatment and disability activism. I'm a licensed psychotherapist, and I also do a lot of work in the field of disability advocacy. I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy when I was 2 years old, and I have been using a power wheelchair since I was 5 years old. The intersection of mental health and disability is extremely important to me, and I'm honored to be presenting today on the psychosocial adjustment after a spinal cord injury and strategies for leading a life of empowerment. Individuals with spinal cord injuries experience radical changes in almost every aspect of their lives. At the onset of paralysis, it's really common to experience a wide range of intense reactions, including disbelief, anger, anxiety, depression, guilt, helplessness, loneliness, and more. Without the proper tools for processing trauma and using inner strengths to achieve wellness, emotional pain may linger for weeks, months, or even years. Therefore, attending to the mental health needs at both the onset of injury and throughout the entire lifespan following injury is critical for building and maintaining a meaningful life. Although every individual will cope in different ways, understanding and embracing strategies for positive mental health and empowerment is often helpful. Becoming empowered requires accepting changes, embracing disability identity, identifying opportunities for independence, learning to reestablish purpose, and holding on to hope and determination. So our outline for today will look like this. First, we will explore common psychosocial challenges among those with spinal cord injuries. Then I'll go into discussing important skills for fostering positive mental health. Information will be presented on basic needs, self-care, and learning to identify and express emotions in healthy ways. Finally, I will explore strategies for achieving and maintaining empowerment, including a focus on embracing disability identity and rejecting societal stereotypes. These subjects tend to be a bit more complex, so to help you reflect more deeply on empowerment in your own life, I'll conclude with reflective takeaways that can help guide your journey. The overall goal is to develop a deeper understanding of the intersection of disability and mental health, and I'm hoping that you will walk away with tangible tips and ideas for enhancing wellness. So let's start by exploring psychosocial challenges facing those with spinal cord injuries. We have to recognize that psychosocial challenges manifest in a much more complex way than physical challenges. At the onset of injury, medical professionals can diagnose and determine the physical impacts of the spinal cord injury relatively quickly. The physical impacts are easier to measure and address with standard treatment. They can explain to families what to expect in terms of physical and bodily changes related to the injury, including decreased mobility and sensation, changes to bowel and bladder functioning, expectations for chronic pain, goals for rehabilitation, and so on. These body changes may be fairly predictable, and they are based directly on the injury itself. In contrast, the psychosocial changes relating to your mood, emotions, internal trauma, self-concept, purpose, sense of belonging, level of social inclusion, sense of empowerment, and so much more are often less predictable. It will be more challenging to identify and measure symptoms of psychological trauma and social barriers. It becomes more complicated to navigate these conversations with families. Addressing these impacts can include a variety of different options, and the prognosis for coping with psychosocial impacts will be based on a number of different factors, aside from just the injury itself. It may include a person's overall level of resiliency, their coping skills prior to the injury, individual belief systems, and more. There is absolutely no singular way that a person with a spinal cord injury will be expected to feel. Everybody is going to cope with paralysis in different ways. So as we go over the common psychosocial challenges, keep in mind that your individual experience might look differently, and that's okay. Everybody is going to cope in different ways, both at the onset of injury and throughout the lifespan following paralysis. Because psychosocial refers to both psychological and social factors, We will look at psychological challenges first, and then turn to social challenges. So some of the most common psychological challenges include anger, anxiety, depression, or intense disappointment, high levels of chronic stress or frustration. Maybe there is going to be a lot of self-blame or unresolved guilt. The person may have difficulty accepting limitations or receiving help. There may be symptoms of trauma, including flashbacks or nightmares. You may have negative body image or shame. There may be negative perceptions of self or some identity confusion. You may have feelings of inadequacy or inferiority due to disability status. You may have feelings of decreased purpose. There may be decreased confidence or self-esteem. There may be feelings of helplessness or hopelessness, lack of motivation or energy. Maybe there's going to be some apathy or simply just not caring about life anymore. And in some cases, there may be suicidal thinking or lack of a desire to live. What else would you add to this list? What else resonates with you? Remember that this is not an exhaustive list, not at all, and it's perfectly normal for you to have a wide variety of emotions. The important thing to remember is that there really is no right or wrong way to emotionally process trauma, either at the onset of injury or throughout the lifespan, as you continue to navigate barriers and build a meaningful life with paralysis. It's okay if mental health challenges surface for you at any point in your life. Nobody's experience will be identical to someone else's. Some of the most common social challenges might include having misunderstandings from other people due to lack of awareness about spinal cord injuries or lack of awareness about disability in general. You may be subjected to disability stereotypes, ableist microaggressions, and discrimination. You may have social isolation due to difficulty accessing the community, systemic barriers like inaccessible community places, obstacles to travel, leisure, or other desires. You may feel a low sense of belonging, especially if there is limited contact with other people in the spinal cord injury community. You may have some marital or relationship conflicts or other types of friendship challenges when considering your social life with a disability, especially when dating with a disability. Or you may feel trapped in family surroundings, or you may feel like a burden to family members. What else would you add? What have you experienced? Again, this is not an exhaustive list, definitely not. And you probably have experienced social challenges not listed here. So think about the experiences that you have had in your life and think about how paralysis has made it difficult for you to feel socially included. All of your experiences, no matter what they are totally valid because they're your truth, they're your reality. All of these psychological and social challenges combined can lead individuals with spinal cord injuries to feel mentally exhausted, primarily because those with spinal cord injuries are constantly learning how they can navigate a non-disabled world or a world that wasn't exactly designed for them. They're navigating this able-bodied world that wasn't set up for people with disabilities in the first place. When we think about the world historically, we know that all of our infrastructures today were not originally designed for individuals with disabilities because most of the time, people with disabilities were isolated historically. There are some exceptions, of course, when we have companies or nonprofits that have been established utilizing concepts like universal design. I love universal design, meaning that they factored in accessibility and disability-related needs in the design process before those infrastructures were developed. But those are typically the exceptions. When we look at the world as a whole, we can recognize that most of the processes, the infrastructures, the systems in place, and the social dynamics of the world have been established without much regard to disability. So what happens as a result is that disability accommodations have to be asked for later. And most people with spinal cord injuries, or more broadly, those with disabilities in general, end up navigating this non-disabled world where things were not originally designed for them, meaning this population is constantly faced with the expectation of having to adapt or having to speak up and to ask for accommodations. And these adaptations that occur in all of our lives every single day if you live with a disability occur both consciously and unconsciously. Adaptation is so embedded into the way that individuals with disabilities approach the world that it becomes second nature to us. Nonetheless, it takes a lot of energy, right? If we're always adapting, if we're always trying to navigate this world that wasn't historically designed for us, that takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of time, a lot of focus, and a lot of attention for people with disabilities to navigate social and systemic barriers, whether it involves facing inaccessible buildings in the community, struggling to secure accommodations in school or in the workplace, navigating complex healthcare systems, figuring out wheelchair accessible transportation or travel, or any other process that involves adaptation and problem solving. Individuals with disabilities have to self advocate. They have to speak up. They have to use resources. They have to think creatively. They have to rely on systems and services. And they really have to fight for making their way through the world, especially for individuals with spinal cord injuries who are simultaneously coping with personal trauma and the overwhelming impacts of acquiring a disability in the middle of life. Adapting to the social and systemic barriers of the world can feel especially draining, which takes a huge toll on their mental health. Given these realities, attending to the mental health needs at the onset of injury and throughout the entire lifespan following injury is really critical for building and maintaining a meaningful life with paralysis. One of the best ways that individuals and families can attend to their mental health needs is to assess what coping mechanisms they already have and what other skills or strategies they may want to adopt. Whenever we face challenges in life, we naturally depend on the internal strengths and skills that we have in order to cope and persevere through adversity. But sometimes our efforts may fall short, and we end up feeling overwhelmed and like we're in need of some additional skills. So, as I talk about coping skills for positive mental health, I want you to consider how these ideas can be added to what you may already be doing in your efforts to cope with mental health struggles. Positive mental health starts with attending to our basic needs. So let's look at diet, exercise, and sleep as a starting point. For diet, we want to make sure that we're prioritizing eating a well balanced diet, making sure that we get a large variety of foods in our diet. We want to make time for each meal. Remember that your body and your mind need fuel. You need that fuel to keep your energy up. So don't skip meals. It's not good for your body and it's not good for your mind. Avoid overeating or undereating. Listen to what your body needs and trust what your body works well with. You also want to avoid comfort eating, such as always getting fast food when you feel stressed. It may feel good temporarily, but most of us do not feel good later once we have indulged ourselves in a lot of junk food. Try to prep meals in advance to limit added stress during the week. And you also want to limit foods that contribute to stress and anxiety. So that would include foods like sugar, caffeine, or really greasy foods. For exercise, we want to make sure that we get our body moving for even just a few minutes every day. Adapting to your new functionality with paralysis usually doesn't mean that you won't be able to exercise. If you can, try to get your arms moving for a little bit every day. You may want to try using a hand cycle or another form of accessible equipment, especially if you have a lower level injury. Some individuals with paralysis may experience greater mobility in the water, so sometimes getting into the swimming pool can be a great way to exercise. For those with upper level injuries or severe paralysis throughout the entire body, having active opportunities to exercise may be difficult for you, but you can still very much take care of your body by stretching or by using range of motion exercises with the assistance of another person. So there's always things that you can do no matter what your function level is. Deep breathing can also be a form of exercise that you can try. Remember that all different types of physical exercise releases endorphins, which can help you with stress management. Having some movement also helps release the buildup of internal chaos or internal stress. It can also distract you from the worries or anxieties that you have because it can add some structure to your daily life, and that can really help you with feeling like you have a bigger sense of control. You can find all different ways to make exercise fun. You may want to try some adaptive yoga or sports like wheelchair basketball or adaptive dance. Wheelchair dance is absolutely an exercise, either with other people or alone. You may also want to incorporate your favorite music to boost your energy and your mood while you're exercising. Always remember to let go of perfectionism. You don't have to be perfect. Oftentimes we compare ourselves to other people, but I really want you to try to get out of that habit. Don't compare yourself to other people, whether you're comparing yourself to others with paralysis or others without paralysis. It's very toxic to make those comparisons. All that matters is that you're doing the best that you can. Then we want to look at sleep. So it's good to prioritize sleep because it gives your body and mind time to restabilize. You want to be consistent with your bedtimes and wake up times. Following a healthy routine can go a long way for your mental health. You want to make sure that your bedroom is quiet, dark, relaxing, and at a comfortable temperature. If you have trouble falling asleep at night, you may want to avoid electronic devices like your phone, television, computer, or tablet. All of these electronic devices just before you go to sleep can make it harder to fall asleep. You may want to create a bedtime ritual that works for you. So you may want to experiment a little bit to see what would relax you the most before sleeping. You may want to consider essential oils, stress relief products, candles, soft music, nature sounds, herbal tea, mindfulness exercises, reading, journaling, warm drinks, a weighted blanket, anything like that that can help you relax. And if insomnia gets really bad or becomes unmanageable, always be sure that you can talk to your doctor about it. Let's talk about prioritizing self-care, another critical coping skill. Practicing self-care means doing things for ourselves that are going to help us feel better. It's about doing things that are going to help alleviate some negative stress or energy inside of us. Self-care can look very differently for all different people, depending on what activities you find to be the most helpful in relieving your stress. A lot of people feel empowered when engaging in self-care activities because it means that they are taking control of their mental health and allowing themselves the time and the space to do something that will elicit feelings of joy and relaxation. Understanding what self-care activities work best for you may require learning more about yourself and getting curious about what helps you and what doesn't help you. Often we have to go through some trial and error to figure out which self-care activities work best for us. And this can mean exploring lots of different things to de-stress, holding on to the ones that work and just throwing out the ones that don't work. The more that we can practice intentionally making time for our own self-care, the more resilient we become, which ultimately helps strengthen our ability to cope with distress, and it helps us manage whatever comes our way. As we are confronted with adversity, we will be more likely to handle it with grace and move forward stronger if we are practicing self-care and remembering to prioritize our own needs. I also want to mention here that caregivers and families specifically, prioritizing self-care means giving yourself the same compassion and care that you give to your loved one living with paralysis. Caregiver burnout is a real struggle for many people when self-care is neglected. So it's really critical to monitor for any feelings of burnout and make sure that you're able to take at least a little bit of time just for yourself. A lot of us were taught growing up that we have to be giving toward other people. And of course, that's a great quality to be giving toward other people. But I don't want you to mistakenly believe that this means taking care of yourself is by any means selfish, because it's not selfish, not at all. In fact, how can we possibly take care of other people if we are running on empty? The truth is that we all have mental health needs that we have to take care of. Those individuals living with paralysis and their caregivers and families, all of these people together, they have mental health needs, and it's important for everybody involved to have time for self-care. If anybody is neglecting their self-care, then we may become resentful, exhausted, or totally burned out. Self-care for all of us helps recharge our batteries so that we can show up for ourselves and others in our most authentic ways. So what if I don't have time for self-care? Okay, this is a very common question that I hear all the time with my clients in therapy. I recommend taking some time to reflect on your priorities and ask yourself why you don't have time for self-care. These are just a few questions that might be helpful. Is there anything that you can minimize in your life? Can you ask for help to create more room in your life? Are there any resources that can help you with your responsibilities? Is there anybody that can step in so that you can experience some relief? Why hasn't your mental health been made a priority? What is getting in the way? How can you communicate to your family or friends that you need some time for self-care? What changes might be a possibility? What hasn't been explored yet? I also want you to remember that self-care doesn't have to require a lot of time. Even small amounts of self-care can still make a difference. Sometimes just taking 5 minutes a few times per day to breathe can be really helpful. Remember that there are many different types of self-care. So I want to go over some of the different categories to help you brainstorm about new self-care activities that you might want to incorporate into your daily life. First, it's important to take care of your body. These are just some examples that I like to think about when talking about body self-care. Take your medication as prescribed or check in with your doctor. Have a glass of cold water, stay hydrated throughout the day. Maybe you need to step outside every once in a while to get some fresh air whenever you feel isolated indoors. Maybe close your eyes and relax your body. You might want to try some guided body meditations that you can easily find online. Take a long, hot shower or bath, especially at the end of your day. It can help you feel like you're washing off all the stress from the day so that you can have a good night of sleep. Use body lotion or other body care products that you enjoy. Or some people really enjoy essential oils to help them de-stress. Change into your favorite clothes. Sometimes just changing your outfit can help a person change their mood. Wrap yourself up in a blanket. This is especially true for people that have different types of sensory conditions. Here are some examples to make sure that you're managing your mental health when it comes to your social relationships. Identify and remove yourself from toxic or negative relationships. Work on setting social boundaries. Spend time with the people that you care most about. Sometimes you might want to try virtual activities. This can include virtual game nights, watching a movie together online, while video chatting with friends or family, exploring a virtual museum online together. Check out zoo animals. Try different video filters, like the ones on Facebook Messenger, or play online games together. Tell someone that you're thankful for them, or express another positive feeling. This can really help people feel like they're taking control of some negative feelings that they have by reframing them into positive feelings. Make something nice to give to friends, family, or a neighbor, whether it be baking cookies or making a nice homemade card. Seek out people of inspiration and read or listen to their stories. A lot of people enjoy TED Talks especially, which can be really nice to watch and then talk about them with other people. You may also want to work on practicing empathy skills. Try to understand why other people think, feel, and react differently from you. Or build on your friendship skills. These are all ways that people can take care of themselves socially to benefit their mental health. For other people, self-care involves engaging in hobbies. So for hobbies, you may want to write, like writing blogs, poetry, stories, or letters. You may want to watch movies or television series, or listen to audio, like podcasts. Play a board game or play cards or computer games. Play an instrument or engage in music in some way, or sing. Take pictures or record videos or audio. Read a good book or magazines or poetry. Draw, doodle, color, paint, or do a craft. Go shopping, either in person or online. Build something or create something. Garden or do some landscape outside. Cook or bake a favorite recipe. Try to learn something new, like a language or a skill or a craft. Or maybe redesign or redecorate something in your home. Another activity that individuals with paralysis will likely benefit from is adaptive recreation. If you haven't already discovered adaptive recreation, I really want to encourage you to look for opportunities in your local community to get involved in recreation that can be adapted to your needs. Chances are that there will be some adaptive recreation organizations in your local community, but if you do not have access to adaptive recreation programming, don't be discouraged. Look for some tips and guidance online for how you can adapt some outdoor activities to meet your needs. Thanks to technology, it is now easier than ever before to video conference with people online, so you can easily connect with people who can teach you strategies for making recreation accessible and for maybe accessing some adaptive equipment. This directly connects to mental health because research has shown that staying active, getting outdoors, and engaging in recreation has a direct positive impact on mental health. Having recreation opportunities that you enjoy gives you something to look forward to. It helps you feel more connected to a social atmosphere. It helps improve your confidence for engaging in new things of all different types. And it helps you manage stress better because engaging in recreation that you enjoy is going to elicit feelings of relaxation and a sense of detachment from the frustrations in your life. It's almost like having an escape from your stress. All of these things combined are known things that lead to better life satisfaction. And who knows, you may discover that you love downhill skiing, hand cycling, horseback riding, or wheelchair soccer. New activities like this can help many people feel better about the stress that they have in their lives. Next, another category of self-care involves looking internally and focusing on yourself. These are just some examples. Schedule time just for you, just for yourself to take care of your needs. Try unplugging from social media. List your positive qualities or successes. Journal about your thoughts and experiences. Challenge your negative self-talk. Try mindfulness or meditation. There are so many opportunities to engage in mindfulness or meditation by going online, going to YouTube or any other site for mindfulness, and watching many different types of videos that can guide you through a mindful or meditative practice. Say no to something that you don't want to do. Sometimes that's just a really good form of self-care. Allow yourself to dream about your personal aspirations. Treat yourself in some way. It's okay to indulge yourself every now and again. You may also want to cope with anxiety by using a stress ball or a fidget toy. This is especially helpful for when we have just a lot of racing thoughts and we feel anxious and overwhelmed, and we just need to get our energy out into something physical. And you may also want to look into mental health phone apps on your phone. There are so many different apps out there, and they can be really helpful for your mental self-care. Beyond practicing all of these different strategies for self-care, the next coping skill that I want to explore is identifying and expressing emotions in healthy ways. When we experience trauma, or when our loved one experiences trauma, one of the most critical components of recovery is psychological processing. Processing our trauma involves talking openly about the way that we feel, not holding it all on the inside, confronting what we are facing, acknowledging the pain that we feel, being brave enough to look back and reflect on what we experienced, and building a healthy emotional narrative that makes sense to us. Processing our trauma like this allows us to heal from the intensity of the situation and become more comfortable talking about what happened. For both those living with paralysis and their families, identifying and acknowledging emotions at both the onset of injury and throughout the entire lifespan following paralysis is really critical, especially because disability-related barriers can show up throughout the lifespan at any time. So why is expressing our emotions so important? Well, it's really important for our mental health because it allows us to take control over our negative feelings, and it helps us avoid becoming debilitated by our internal stress. When we can identify what our emotions are, we can work on accepting them, managing them, and coping with them. Sometimes when we talk about coping, people are under this impression that we always have to distract ourselves away or dissociate away from our negative feelings all the time because we just want those feelings to go away. And that makes sense because we don't like to feel sad. We don't like to feel angry. We just want to pretend that we don't feel that way. We want to distract ourselves. And, sometimes that may be helpful. Sometimes it can be helpful for a moment to temporarily distract yourself and to focus on something more positive instead to get you through a moment of panic. But for many of us, if this becomes a habit, this habit of always distracting ourselves away from how we really feel, usually that habit spirals into a trap of denying how we really feel. We may find ourselves fighting all the time, fighting against how we are really feeling. We may just pretend like everything is okay. We may not want to admit to anyone, even to ourselves, that we are feeling depressed, angry, or disappointed about how paralysis is affecting us. We may be telling ourselves that it's not okay to be upset and that we shouldn't feel this way. We may be telling ourselves that we have to be strong for others. Now, the problem with that approach is that it's going to feel very invalidating. It's going to feel like we are dismissing ourselves. And when we do that, we are not helping us in the long run. We're actually amplifying our distress in the long run over time. So in the short term, right, just that temporary moment, denying how we feel may feel good for just a minute. But over time, we're going to start to notice that distress getting bigger and bigger, building up inside of us. If you've ever heard the phrase, don't bottle up all of your emotions, that's exactly what I'm talking about. We don't want to be bottling up all of our feelings because in the long run, those feelings are going to become more and more amplified inside of us, and they're eventually going to spill over or explode. So no matter what emotions you are feeling, it's really important to acknowledge them. Allow yourself to feel authentically. Feel what you feel. Try to work on that. Work on accepting reality as it is, and just sit with the uncomfortable and potentially distressing thoughts and feelings that may surface. Call it out. Just say, yeah, I'm really upset right now. I'm really disappointed. Expressing these emotions and talking with the people that you trust most about what you're going through is going to help you tremendously in the recovery process. Especially throughout your life after injury as well, during moments of high stress, asking yourself some of these questions can be helpful in restabilizing your emotions. Here are some examples. What feelings am I having right now? What feelings am I aware that I'm having? And there are often many different feelings, and it's okay to feel more than one thing. Which feeling is the strongest or the most prominent? Try to describe it to yourself. Can you explain what it is? Don't be afraid to push past really basic answers like fine or okay. Continue by asking yourself what fine means, right? So if you're like, I'm fine, I don't really know, I guess I'm okay, try to dig a little deeper and try to define that. What does that actually mean? When did you become aware of this feeling? What might be triggering this feeling? What's happening or not happening that feels threatening to you right now? How can I manage this feeling? What has been successful for me in the past when I have felt like this? Who can I reach out to for support? Who do I feel safe talking to? My last coping skill here for positive mental health, before we move on to empowerment strategies, is to normalize your feelings, whatever they might be, and reject any expectations from others. I really want to encourage you to reject the stereotype that says people with disabilities are strong all the time. Because unfortunately, that's a stereotype in the world that we live in. Because sometimes non-disabled people think individuals with disabilities are so inspirational or brave for being heroes or being strong and happy all the time. We especially see this stereotype portrayed in the media sometimes, like when journalism articles depict someone with a disability as a hero or an unstoppable superhuman. But what I want you to know, if there's anything that you're taking away from this presentation, what I really want you to know is that you don't have to be portrayed as the strong, inspirational person all the time. Not at all. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel discouraged or disappointed or frustrated when you're faced with a paralysis related challenge. It's okay to grieve the loss of abilities. It's okay to talk openly about your difficult experiences. Having a wide range of feelings, both positive and negative, is really healthy, and it's okay to express them. Now we are going to shift gears and talk about achieving empowerment by embracing disability identity. Individuals with spinal cord injuries usually go through a transformation in their identity because they suddenly acquire the status of disability in the middle of their lifetimes. It feels incredibly overwhelming, and it leaves people often wondering, who am I now? What does it mean to have a disability? How does disability impact who I am as a whole person? Accepting a label of disability can be very difficult for many people, but it can also be an important part of the healing process. Sometimes embracing disability identity and recognizing that disability is only one part of your life can be empowering because it helps people acknowledge their lived experiences of having limitations while also rejecting any shame about having a disability. And I'll explain that more. So, to start out, we have to acknowledge that unfortunately, there are social stigmas and misconceptions about disability that position disability as a bad thing or an inferior thing. Historically, disability was framed as something that was inferior, and this is a really sad reality, and it's something that can be very difficult to talk about. Unfortunately, there are still a lot of misconceptions and stigmas and stereotypes that lead non disabled people to have bias toward individuals with disabilities. We've come a long way in the past several decades in our efforts to normalize and accept disability, reduce stigma, and make the world more accessible, especially since the passing of the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1990. However, many people with disabilities still face bias, misunderstandings, or discrimination from non disabled people. This typically happens because a lot of people in the world don't understand disability very well. Maybe they've never had much exposure to disability. Maybe they feel uncomfortable not knowing how to interact with someone with a disability, or maybe they shy away from disability simply because they have negative feelings about disability. As a result, ableism is reinforced, which means that stereotypes, misconceptions, discrimination, and disability-related bias continues in society. Ableism and ableist behavior may show up in the form of microaggressions or subtle judgment against people with disabilities. And this is often what leads people with disabilities to feel a sense of shame for having a disability. This is called internalized ableism. Anytime that we feel ashamed about something, we become less and less likely to identify with it. That makes sense, right? If we feel ashamed about something, we usually don't talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. And maybe we don't even want to admit it to other people or ourselves. We don't want to even admit it to ourselves because it's painful, it's difficult, and it's something that we feel shame about. So, for individuals with spinal cord injuries who have negative perceptions of disability or who have been exposed to other people in society who have really negative misunderstandings or perceptions of disability, it makes sense that accepting disability as part of their life now would be so difficult. But this is a problem because not identifying as a person with a disability, not accepting the label, refusing to associate with it, reinforces the stigma that disability is something to feel ashamed about. And that can lead people with disabilities to have negative mental health consequences. The reality is that disability is not shameful. Having a disability is not something that you should feel ashamed about. Nobody asked to have a disability. This was never something that you wanted or had a choice about. You don't have to feel ashamed about something that is out of your control. In fact, feeling shame means that you have been so heavily influenced by the power of society that your confidence and your pride has been diminished as a result. But listen, you have the choice to reject the social construct of disability as being an inferior status. You have the choice to reject whatever society says about disability. I really want to remind people with spinal cord injuries listening to this presentation today that you have the option to reclaim the power that you have so that you can create meaning out of disability and your confidence with disability, however you choose. Developing confidence with disability is sometimes called developing disability pride. Disability pride, or simply just embracing disability identity, seems to protect our self-esteem against the negative effects of stigma. It's a really valuable protection for people with spinal cord injuries and disabilities in general, because embracing the label can decrease the negative mental health impacts of feeling a sense of disability shame. But disability pride is, of course, a very complex subject. It's complicated. It's not just black or white. This isn't always easy. Some people are in favor of the concept of disability pride, while other people with disabilities really struggle to celebrate or embrace something that has caused them a great deal of pain or hardship, and I completely understand that. We are all in different places in our growth and development. I absolutely do not want to dismiss or minimize the emotional pain that you feel. We all have different life experiences. We all come from different perspectives, and all of that needs to be honored and respected no matter what you believe, how you choose to identify, where you come from, or what you want to think about disability. We all have different ideas about disability identity, and I think it's really important, more than anything else, to simply respect and honor each other and honor how these complex ideas are viewed and talked about with different people. As a therapist and as a person, I want you to know that your emotional pain is valid and your trauma is directly associated with the spinal cord injury. So if you are not in favor of embracing disability, or if you hate the idea of disability pride because you're still healing from the emotional trauma, I want to reinforce that is completely okay. Every individual will have a unique journey. But I do want to take a moment here just to mention that from what I know, a lot of people that embrace this idea of disability pride have said that there can be a lot of freedom in just owning it, own your disability identity, and embrace this complicated and messy aspect of your everyday life. A lot of people have found that there's a lot of freedom and empowerment in that. People that typically celebrate or embrace disability pride often say that it's really not about liking your disability. It's not about pretending like your disability doesn't cause you pain or hardship. Rather, claiming disability pride for the people that most commonly celebrate disability pride, they commonly say that it's just about rejecting the notion that you should feel ashamed of your body or your disability. Because again, just to reinforce, you should not feel ashamed. Even if the social system that we live in has made you feel that way because of ableism, oppression, discrimination, or just feeling like you don't fit in. So, although we have to respect and honor all different opinions here, I really want you to think about disability pride as a concept that means you don't accept society's definition of disability. Loving your disabled body, loving everything about yourself as a person with a spinal cord injury is a radical act that can challenge the way people in society think about disability. Consider the idea that if we can't be proud of ourselves, if we can't own our disability identity, or if we can't embrace this complicated part of ourselves, then we might be contributing to the idea that disability is something to be ashamed about in society. That's a really toxic message to put out into the world, one that diminishes others with disabilities and one that reinforces ableism, all things that we don't want. I'm hoping that you might consider how your disability is a part of who you are. It is certainly not everything that you are, but it is a part of you. Always remember that it is not shameful, and it's not something that you need to hide or minimize. This relates to my earlier point about accepting your feelings surrounding disability, whatever they may be. And if you find yourself opening up about these subjects in your community, and the non disabled people around you start to feel a little uncomfortable with those subjects, that really says more about those people than it does about you. You don't have to comfort them. You don't have to take care of them emotionally. You're allowed to talk about your disability as much or as little as you want without worrying if the non disabled people around you are going to become uncomfortable. That's really not your problem. You deserve to be authentic. You deserve to take up space in the world. You deserve to talk about it and to not give anybody a reason that there would ever be a reason to feel ashamed about it. Always remember that you don't have to be afraid to embrace whatever your experiences are as they relate to your paralysis and your mental health. Aside from embracing disability identity, I want to provide you with a few other strategies for achieving and maintaining empowerment. First, I encourage all of you to build a strong support system with others in the spinal cord injury community, and then continuously check in with the people that you relate to the most. For many of us with disabilities, talking with other people who share similar challenges can be a huge source of comfort and relief. If you go to school or work in an office where you might be the only person with a disability, you may experience feeling really misunderstood from time to time, which can take a toll on your mental health. But when you have a strong support system that includes other people in the disability community, you may experience the positive mental health benefits, like being able to talk to people who naturally understand your reality, learning from others with paralysis who have been in your shoes before, accessing tools and resources from others living with spinal cord injuries, and knowing that you have safe people that you can talk to about your experiences without being judged. Having a strong support system within the disability community is ultimately going to benefit you because it's going to help alleviate those feelings of loneliness by facilitating conversations with other people who just understand paralysis firsthand. If you're feeling concerned about living in a region where there maybe aren't that many other people with spinal cord injuries, maybe what you need to do is go online and look up different organizations. Definitely check out the Reeve Foundation and the Mentor Program and all the resources there. Thanks to technology, it's now easier than ever before to utilize platforms like FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, Google Hangouts, and many other platforms so that you can genuinely connect with people anywhere in the world. Remember to always have an open mindset. Remember that it takes time to build up strong relationships. Always be yourself, and don't be afraid to be honest about your experiences. Sometimes it's hard to be vulnerable or open up about some of your paralysis-related experiences. But more often than not, being honest with other people and really letting them get to know you is what leads to the strongest connections. Another strategy for empowerment is to make sure that you have your voice heard. For many of us with disabilities, it can sometimes feel like other people are speaking for us, whether they are teachers or healthcare professionals, employers, or other community leaders. Sometimes it feels like we're not being heard. This is why self-advocacy and speaking up is so important in every aspect of your life. And the power of sharing your own story, whether through an online blog, a YouTube channel, or any community opportunity to raise awareness about spinal cord injuries, these things can really help amplify your voice and can lead you to feel like you have more power and control. Sharing your story can also help your friends, families, coworkers, neighbors, and other people in your community understand your life better. It can open their eyes to what paralysis means for you, and it can help increase their knowledge of spinal cord injuries overall. This means that more people in your community will be aware of issues that affect those with spinal cord injuries, and they may end up being more likely to create inclusive spaces and accessible spaces for all people with disabilities in the community. This also means that other people with disabilities in your community might feel more represented as you share your story. You can lead by example for them with all different types of differences, to speak out more, to be more authentic. You're going to be a role model. Ultimately, you're helping to create positive change every time you share your story. And you're helping to create inclusive spaces where people of all different types of limitations or differences can feel like it's okay to share their unique reality. Doing all of these things positions you as a leader in your community. And as you allow that leadership to resonate with you, you may experience the mental health benefit of feeling like you have a stronger sense of purpose. And developing a stronger sense of purpose is very closely connected to empowerment. Remember to always allow yourself to be heard. Your voice matters. Your opinions matter. This is your life, and I want you to feel in control. Don't allow the opinions of other people to overshadow you. Another great tip for empowerment is to practice positive affirmations when you start to feel discouraged. A lot of people, including those with and without disabilities, use positive affirmations as a mental health strategy because when we are intentionally using positive statements, whether we are speaking them verbally, writing them down on paper, or just going over them mentally in our heads, we are more likely to feel a greater sense of calm, clarity, and peace. It's really normal for us to feel negative sometimes, and it's normal to have automatic negative thoughts that quickly enter our minds every now and again. But you have the power to decide whether you're going to allow those negative thoughts to consume you and overwhelm you, or if you're going to reframe those thoughts into something more positive. I want you to know that just because you have a negative thought about yourself, that doesn't mean that you have to believe that thought. It doesn't mean that you have to feed into that thought. It doesn't mean that you have to internalize that thought. Instead, what you can do is acknowledge that you're having a negative thought, but then give yourself permission to let that negative thought go and focus on a positive affirmation instead. So, the idea here is to challenge our negative feelings and frustrations, almost like standing up to them, fighting them, and reminding ourselves that we don't have to give in to those negative feelings or frustrations, but rather we can reframe our negative feelings into more positive statements. And by repeating these positive statements to ourselves, we are reinforcing these realities. With repetition and practice, it's almost like we are retraining our brains so that we believe these statements. Because in reality, these statements are the truth. And we don't want our negative automatic thoughts to cloud our judgment and make us feel negative about ourselves. The positive affirmations listed here are just a few disability-specific examples of what you might find helpful. My disability does not define me. I am more than my disability. Paralysis is just one part of my life. I know that I am strong and capable. Paralysis cannot make me feel unworthy or unloved. Emotions are temporary. My negative feelings will pass. Nobody else can make me feel inferior or less than my worth. I am proud of myself, even with a disability. I am proud of my life. I am a whole, complete person. My spinal cord injury does not change that. I deserve equal opportunities, inclusion, positive relationships, and respect. I have a strong, powerful voice. My voice matters. I deserve to feel heard. I encourage you to think about additional positive affirmations on your own, because you may be more likely to use this strategy for empowerment if you come up with the statements yourself. So get creative with these. There's really no right or wrong way to make a positive affirmation. Think about what kinds of words make you feel good about yourself. Write down the things that you love about yourself. Write down the things that you're proud of. Maybe write down the things that you have accomplished. Overall, your positive affirmations should be sources of confidence for you and self-esteem boosters that can help you feel more empowered. To wrap up our discussion for today, let's look at some takeaways and next steps. So I've been talking a lot about mental health and empowerment, but why does this matter so much? Why is this so important? It's important because if we have positive mental health, we are going to have more success in coping with disability-related stress and facing the challenges that we experience related to spinal cord injuries. Having positive mental health will increase your coping abilities so that you can better tolerate distress when you're faced with a barrier or when you're faced with something that feels like discrimination in society. It's pretty safe to assume that all people with spinal cord injuries will, at one point or another, experience feeling a little different or having other people that don't have disabilities misunderstand them. So you may be subject to misconceptions and stereotypes. You may have people of authority speak over you. You may be treated differently. You may struggle with feeling like you don't belong somewhere because of paralysis. Having positive mental health and better coping skills will help you handle those feelings of frustration. It will help you tolerate those experiences. And it will help you have more grace and flexible thinking when you are subject to those negative experiences so that you don't allow those experiences to overwhelm you or make you feel inferior. Having positive mental health will also help us in maintaining our resiliency, our problem solving abilities, our adaptation, our ability to have a growth oriented mindset, all of these things and more. Overall, positive mental health can allow us to realize new things about ourselves, develop better relationships, cope with many different stressors of life, create and achieve goals, work and learn more productively, and contribute more to your community. Absolutely. All of these things are possible when we maintain positive mental health. And that's why I work so hard to dismantle the stereotypes and the stigmas about accessing mental health treatment. Because if there is something that you can do to help maintain positive mental health or to improve your mental health when you're experiencing anxiety, depression, or other challenges, I want you to make that choice to get treatment. I always like to say that life is hard enough, so don't make it harder for yourself by suffering in silence or neglecting your mental health. There are so many options available today for accessing mental health care. And now, with the rise of telehealth becoming more and more popular, it's easier than ever before to access mental health treatment from the comfort of your home, which can be especially important for people with spinal cord injuries that may have barriers getting to an appointment. Now it's time to look at your next steps. By now, you should have a lot of information that you can walk away with from this presentation today. But beyond just carrying this information with you, I want you to actively reflect on this information. So let's consider the questions here. How is your mental health? Really think about that question. Are you experiencing symptoms of anxiety or depression? Do you have relationship concerns? Do you feel like you're able to manage your stress in the best way possible? Or do you find yourself feeling stressed out most of the time? What do you need to work on? We all have things to work on. If you're struggling with anxiety, you may want to look into some mindfulness practices or changes in your daily routine. If you're feeling depressed, you may want to think about some of the reasons that are causing you to feel that way and focus on making some healthier changes in your life so that you can take better care of yourself and address those symptoms. I know that thinking about what you need to work on might feel overwhelming, but I hope that part of you can also feel empowered as you make a list of things that you want to work on, because it means that you're taking back your control, and it means that you are being intentional about developing positive mental health, which is pretty awesome. What strategies can you adopt? So, what can you take away with you from today to implement into your own life? How can you create time in your life to prioritize any of the strategies that I talked about? How can you feel like it's okay to make time for self care? How can you create small changes that lead up to big results? Sometimes, even just adopting one or two strategies can make a big difference in your mental health. Remember that making changes is a process. So be gentle with yourself if you can't master everything right away. That's okay. And finally, what are your resources? Do you have people that can support you as you take these next steps? Do you have a healthcare team that you trust that can point you in the right direction for finding a counselor? Think about whatever resources that you have in your life that can be a part of your mental health care plan. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation today. I am so grateful to be in a position where I can share my knowledge on the intersection of mental health and disability. Remember that I'm always here to support you, and I really enjoy connecting with people across the country and throughout the world. So no matter where you're listening to this presentation, I want you to know that I'm approachable, and you can always email me at lauren@riveroakpsychology.com, listed here on this slide, with any questions, ideas, or other topics that you would like me to address in the future. My mission is to help individuals with disabilities develop positive mental health and strong feelings of empowerment so that they can lead their fullest lives possible. So if I can support you in any way, don't hesitate to reach out. Now at this time, I would love to answer your live questions. Please access the link in the chat window to attend the Q&A session.